sometimes it's useful not only to call a function, but also to send pieces of data into the function. Pieces of data that are sent to the function are known as arguments. A function can use its arguments in calculations or other operations. When you call a function, the argument is placed in parentheses following the function name. And if you want a function to receive arguments when it's called, you must give that function with one or more parameters. Parameters are special variables that are assigned the value of arguments when a function is called. And this is the general format of a function definition. So in the parentheses, you can define the parameters that this function will accept. So when you call this function, you will need to pass some data to this parameter, and that data is called arguments. And at that time, the parameter and the argument will refer to the same value. And the parameter is also a kind of a variable. So we learned about a variable scope, like local variables. A variable is only visible to the statements inside the variable scope. A parameter variable, its scope is in the function in which the parameter is used. So the parameter is a little bit similar to the local variable, that its scope is also inside the function that's being used. And all the statements inside the function can access this variable, this parameter variable, but no statements outside the function can access this parameter variable. So that's the scope of the parameters. And let's take a look at an example. This is the main function that defines a value variable and assign this value to be 5. And then it calls a function called show double and pass in this value as an argument to the show double function. This is a definition of the show double function, which takes one argument. So this number is a parameter of this show double function. And when this show double is being called here, this value, which is this argument, is passed to this number variable, which is the parameter. So this number is now assigned to be the same data or to be the same value as this value variable. And this is show double. We'll just use this parameter and calculate double the result and then print the result. So this is how you pass this argument value to the function that's being called. So what happens behind the scene is when this show double is calling this show double function, value is assigned to number so that value and number, so both these two variables are pointing to the same piece of data, which is 5, which is defined here. And a lot of times, you also need to pass more than one piece of data. So in that case, a function needs to accept multiple arguments. And a Python allows writing a function that accepts multiple arguments by including a parameter list. So inside the parentheses, instead of only having one parameter, you have a list of parameters separated by comma. And when you pass arguments to the parameters, it's passed by position, which means the first parameter receives the value of the first argument, a second parameter receives the value of the second argument, etc. For example, there are two parameters defined in this show sum function that has they are num1, num2. So these two parameters are separated by comma, and this is a parameter list. And then in the main function, in this statement, it calls this show sum function and passes two arguments, 12 and 45. And these arguments are passed by position. So 12 is assigned to num1, 45 is assigned to num2. And when the execution comes here, the interpreter actually jumps to here and assign num1 to 12, num2 to 45, and then add them together. And then the result is printed out at the end of the show sum function. So what happens inside the show sum function is num1 is pointing to this piece of data, 12. Num2 is pointing to this piece of data, 45. So this is passing multiple arguments to a function. And when an argument is passed to a function in Python, the function parameter variable will reference the argument's value. However, any changes that are made to the parameter variables will not affect the argument. So this is known as pass by value. So we also call this unidirectional communication between the one function and another function. So this way that one function can communicate with another function, and the communication channel works in only one direction. The calling function can communicate with the called function, but the called function cannot use the argument to communicate with the calling function. Let's take a look at an example. So in this example, the main function defines a variable value equals 99, and then this line of code will print the value is 99. And then change me function is called. So it's calling change me function right here by passing in this argument value to the change me function. And at this point, the interpreter will jump here to the change me function definition and assign value to arg, so that value and arg are both pointing to the same piece of data, 99. And then the interpreter starts to execute the entire function. It will print, I'm changing the value. And then it assigns 0 to arg. So now arg is 0. And this line of code will print, now the value is 0. Okay, so when this is done, that's the end of the execution of change me function. The execution will go back to resume the main function, which will print back in main the value is, at this point, it will print the value is 99. So you can try this yourself to see what is being printed out. At this point, this value here is still 99, although this arg has been changed to 0. So what happens is 0 is another piece of data that's created in memory in execution the change me function, and arg is pointing to 0 instead of pointing to 99. So although arg has been changed in the change me function, this value are still pointing to 99. So this value, the value has not changed. It's still 99. So that's what we call pass by value, and it's just one directional communication.